So this is Ludwig Fischer again, and I ended that last part of this presentation with mentioning the book Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, 1962. When more and more people then in the following decades realized that the ideology of progress that we thought in the 20th century would guarantee that life that many cultures, many people at different times in history were dreaming of would be realized, actually was driving the whole world into a serious ecological crisis. So, where are we moving from here? We have options. And the options that the people at Monteverita chose, they come, I think, with a reform idea as a larger context. And actually, the umbrella's term was a German word, the Lebensreform. That literally means life reform. We are reforming our basic assumptions and attitudes and the way we think and practice our living time here on earth. So they did 7 things differently. What are they? I think number 1 is rethinking how we value tradition. There were some very, very sharp critics. There's a whole movement called the traditionalists. From a theological perspective, I think it's very important to read the books, especially the book The Reign, R-E-I-G-N, The Reign of Quantity and the Signs of Time, René Guénon, that went then to Cairo, to Egypt, and joined the Islamic religion as a religion that was still connected to divine order. The appreciation of tradition. Now, this is not advocating a certain conservatism that just everything old is good, but it is really looking at, as the esoteric quests have done, what is it truly that we not only can, should, but need to draw from the wisdom of earlier cultures, or from earlier groups within cultures that preserved something extremely valuable. Because the conventionally accepted mode of thinking and living is usually somehow poisoned, becomes toxic after a while from the temptations of convenience, And it's then when the memory of traditions, to go deeper to the source, what I say, deeper into the mountain of truth where the minerals still are. And also look a little bit further beyond and above. The second memory that they have cultivated at Monteverita is that there were sciences before the analytical way. And that way, if we cannot measure, it just doesn't exist. That kind of attitude of modern science. This mechanistic, materialistic point of view. There were other views. Alchemy. What were the wisdom teachings of that way of thinking? Or things that have been taught at universities for centuries. And suddenly they became a non-science. Astrology. So an opening of that which provides us with knowledge, sources, to move away from an ideology that restricts and dismisses too much. The third one is to honor the body. Honoring the needs of the body that needs nourishing, that has natural needs, that needs to be supplied food for a natural organism. So when you see pictures of Monteverita where actually the consul of the Netherlands is digging holes into the ground and with a spade, and he's naked. That human being is also a two-legged animal. And it needs in its environment clean air. It needs the elements to be in harmony and kept into harmony. It's a wonderful book by David Suzuki called Sacred Elements. The third one here is the healing system and practices which support and bring into balance the innate healing forces. This is a greater problem today than it was then. Because during the time when the people at Monteverita gathered is when we have the elimination and suppression of natural healing systems. Then the fifth point here is work. There were social revolutionaries at Monteverita. And there were people like Max Weber were there. It was a time when the assembly lines were running fast. But what was lost, and still lost even more today, is labor as building the person, not just building products. Labor that creates an identity where a mastery is performed, a mastery of a subject of a person, either physical or mental or social. And then we have the sixth point, which played a huge role in Monteverita, and that is an art that makes the person sing, paint, dance, sculpt, that is inspired by the great masterpieces of the respective cultural traditions and can adopt great masterpieces from other traditions. And that's, of course, the opposite of what we have today largely in what we call entertainment. And then the seventh point is that connection with the divine. Connecting with the dimension of the sacred which does not divide people into sectarian conflicts. A spirituality greater than dogmatic belief systems, demanding simple obedience. And the eighth point is a perspective on the future as a practical idealism that is available to everyone. Now, I've been actually preparing different presentation on each one of these 8 points that I only mention here briefly. So, the Monteveritana, I think, were characterized quite well by George Bernard Shaw. He was a young man, actually, at that time, when the people lived at Monteverita. He said, reasonable people adjust themselves to the way of the world. Unreasonable people try to change the world that they see. Therefore, all real progress depends on unreasonable people. So anyway, I think there are a lot of unreasonable people in that conference in this September of the year 25 at the former area of Monteverita. And we really need each one of them. So, I like to disagree a little bit with Martin Green in his book, Mountain of Truth, The Counterculture Begins, Ascona, 1900 to 1920. Although I think it's a very valuable, overall a very good book. But he writes, in 1900, a group of disaffected intellectuals preoccupied with their own unhappiness in a rapidly industrializing Europe built a nature-cure sanatorium on a small hill outside the tiny Swiss fishing village of Ascona. Soon others joined them, erecting ramshackle cabins and villas on a hill which they called Monteverita, Mountain of Truth. Well, I think they were more than disaffected intellectuals. Green focused on Otto Gross and Gustav Gräser and Rudolf von der Bahn. Those were certainly very important representatives, and other people will talk about them. I want to go back to a Monteveritana, whom I think all of you who are there have heard of. But he lived actually over 100 years earlier. I'm talking about Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, that great German genius. And I think it's well known that he had a big argument with Newton, that his view of nature is anti-mechanistic, anti-materialistic science, served as great inspiration and as a source of significantly of Rudolf Steiner's thinking and his work. However, Goethe writes in 1832, and I couldn't help to include that for you. Goethe, 1832. He says, man in his misguidance has powerfully interfered with nature. He has devastated the forests and thereby even changed the atmospheric conditions and the climate. How could Goethe talk about climate change in 1832? Some species of plants and animals have become entirely extinct through man, although they were essential in the economy of nature. Everywhere the purity of the air is affected by smoke and the like, and the rivers are defiled. These and other things are serious encroachments upon nature, which men nowadays entirely overlook, but which are of the greatest importance, and at once show their evil effect not only upon plants, but upon animals as well, the latter not having the endurance and power of resistance of man. End of quote. Goethe, 1832. I especially mention that because those who are working on the holistic ecological paradigm shift, you do have roots, deep roots. So, and that's what they remembered, the Monteveritana. They did have that resistance, that heart remembrance, that soul connection, that spirit guidance, that embodied inner wisdom to not only disagree, protest, but also to renew, reenact, revitalize what modernity was so eager to destroy. They were a small group. Their vision was living reality for a relatively short time, but they did not fail. They left a rich inheritance, a great heritage to be reclaimed from then on, and certainly into our time. And of course, the much quoted Margaret Bateson quote comes to mind: never underestimate the power of a small committed people to effect change. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has. I just want to add to that, never, and I modify here Bateman's statement a little bit, never underestimate the power of seemingly old alternative ideas, esoteric ideas. They may not have become social and political reality at the time, but they preserved the powerful and most necessary seeds for the trees of the future and the solution for the society in crisis today.